elections are ordained. You can just put something in the fucking computer and it'll spit out the percent you're going to get. It turned out that was a really, really stupid assumption. It was the storyline after the 2024 election was Trump had made significant gains among younger voters, particularly younger males, non-white males, and made significant Hispanic gains. The press made the mistake that we all make, that I made. We thought this was a permanent condition.
Hey, James, we welcome back John Della, Director of Polling at the John F. Kennedy Institute of Politics at Harvard. No one knows more about the attitudes of young voters. Just last month, he completed a poll of more than 2,000 18 to 29-year-olds. John, the results were dispiriting, chilling. These young Americans are not just pessimistic. Only 13% in your survey think the country is heading in the right direction. Big majority say they don't believe they'll have the same standard of living as their parents. That used to be the definition of the American dream. You do better than your parents. Is this the lowest that you've ever seen it?
Thanks. It's good to be back with you guys. Al, I've been doing this for 25 years. This is the 51st edition of this survey. So that means that we interviewed millennials during, the Great Recession. And yes, we've never seen the economic numbers, the right track, wrong track, as bad as it is today. We talk about this often. I've been on this pod in the past. I think I probably talked about, stress or anxiety, but folks are just downright frightened now about their futures.
Well, you mentioned that obviously a lot of it is economic, affordability, and healthcare. What really struck me is that more than immigration or shipping jobs overseas or downsizing, the real threat they see is artificial intelligence.
Yeah, and that's obviously new. We've all of us, especially the most vulnerable, oftentimes younger people, are obviously concerned about the rate of inflation and the day-to-day stress of paying, groceries, utilities, gas, rent, etc. But now, as you noted, we had a series of questions about the future. And we found that overwhelming majorities, and it doesn't matter whether you have college degree or whether you're in college or don't have that experience, there's essentially no significant difference in terms of the concerns they have about their future job opportunities because of AI. And I think that is one of the things, Al, that's driving, the right track, wrong track, because you've got this economic concern, you've got longer term economic concern, and folks are looking for leadership, right? And they're not finding it.
Well, they don't have much confidence in capitalism, though they're not especially enamored with socialism either. But they're down on democracy. Almost half think it's teetering, and another 19% say it's already failed, John.
And when I step back and I talk to young people and I ask them to explain that question and that response, and they said, you defend this system of democracy that creates that doesn't create the opportunities that my parents and grandparents had, that on a regular basis, we're seeing innocent school children, slaughtered and gun violence, that we're working as hard as we can. And we've got, tens of thousands of dollars of debt. Many people that I know are homeless. You defend that kind of democracy to me when clearly, the public feels a different way about the direction of the country than what Washington is delivering for us. So that's the response I get. And it's a pragmatic perspective. And frankly, I think it's hard to disagree with from their perspective.
It's hard to argue with, for sure. Politically, everybody gets bad marks. They're down on both parties. It may be, for now at least, a little bit less bad for Democrats, perhaps because they're the outs. In 2026, I think you asked about preference, and Dems were about 17 points above Republicans, but that's higher than they were in 2024 when Trump had made gains with these voters. Trump has really, he's back to where he was before.
Yeah, he is. There's when we look ahead, we just had one question, regarding the midterms. A couple of questions. We had, likelihood to vote, and we clearly see more enthusiasm among younger Democrats. Although that's a shrinking part of the youth electorate in terms of more folks not identifying with either party. But you're right. There's a solid, 17 or so point advantage for Democrats heading into next year, and that advantage, that double digit advantage, cuts across most of the important subgroups that we're looking at. The only ones where there's not a double digit advantage, there's still an advantage, would be with kind of the non-college cohort as well as with white voters, but there's still a Democratic advantage. So that is, one of the only pieces of good news for Democrats kind of in this survey is that they're running against Trump and Republicans right now. And relatively speaking, Democrats, as you said, have an advantage, and they seem to bounce back relative to 2024. But of course, it's a very different electorate. We don't know what the electorate will look like, a year from now.
James Carville.
Well, thank you. And I'm really want to have this conversation with you. And anybody that's been around in politics as long as I have, you make monumental mistakes, strategic mistakes. Maybe the biggest one I made is I wrote a book saying the Democrats were destined to win for 40 more years. Because look, the young people, we had the under 30, we had the non-whites, and that was a growing coalition, and that would win elections. It's what I call political Presbyterianism, that elections are ordained, that you can just put something in the fucking computer and it'll spit out the percent you're going to get. It turned out that was a really, really stupid assumption. It was the storyline after the 2024 election was Trump had made significant gains among younger voters, particularly younger males, non-white males, and made significant Hispanic gains. The press made the mistake that we all make, that I made. We thought this was a permanent condition. How fluid is it out there with these young people? How would you try to solidify their opinion in the direction of things that we believe in? Pluralism, a kind of active government that is sort of looking out after what people really need as opposed to what powerful people need or whatever. Just give us a Della Volpe strategy to solidify and get the gains that now we're getting just because we don't have an R after our name. Let's be candid about it.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing we have going for us.
Right.
So, James, let me push back a little bit on your analysis of your own writing. I'm not sure that was stupid. Okay. What was stupid is not working to see that become reality. Okay. Because we had a coalition whose values, okay, in terms of believing in a robust government to address the systemic challenges that we face around economics, around healthcare, around housing, around climate, et cetera. Those things were aligned. Okay. The problem I see, and we've talked about this quite a bit over the last 4 or 5 years, is that the practitioners have taken that for granted, right, and didn't work at it. And we don't work at it. And by definition of working at it is listening better, is reflecting the concerns that younger people have into your rhetoric, into your policy. That's when people feel disillusioned, that they feel like the party is performative, and they are basically saying, you know what, I'm open to other perspectives. And I think the lesson over the last 12 months that I've learned is that younger men aren't necessarily Republican. Younger people in this cycle aren't necessarily Democrats. They're open. Okay, that's what they are, right? They're open and accessible and pragmatic and willing to leave whatever perceived ideologies we might have of them behind to vote for something that's going to make a tangible impact in their life ASAP, because so many are struggling.
So, well, just a minute. Thank you for trying to cover my ass, but I don't totally agree. What I should have written is a book. We have these gains. How do we consolidate them? How do we solidify them? And I did
There you
do
go.
that. But look, to make a mistake, but make a mistake and not learn from a mistake is horrible. So, let's talk about young people in capitalism. Why, if I was 24 years old, why would I like capitalism? What is it delivered for me that as a 24-year-old, it would make me feel good about it?
only what younger people tell me is if you're one of the kind of the 1% of elites who
Yeah.
have a well networked pathway, but for the vast majority of other
I'm
folks, it's
talking
not
about
working.
75%
Right.
of them. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if your daddy is Larry Ellison, you got to love it.
If your daddy
Yeah,
is James
exactly. Right.
Carville, you know, if you know, you
Yeah.
walk away, you don't have student debt. Yeah, you know, your parents help you, you know, with a down payment or whatever. But there's not many. But just a 24-year-old. What? And I did this. Andrew Ross
Yeah.
Sorkin, and I said capitalism needs an intervention. Okay, we can't leave it to its own devices because it'll devour everything in its
Right.
way.
One of the most the first time that identified that number was probably a decade ago when we did the Harvard Youth poll, and 42% indicated that they supported capitalism. I thought it was a mistake. I thought it was the 1 out of 20 polls that has some error in it, the margin of error. I did another poll. It wasn't until folks got over the age of 50 where there was net support, James and I went out and started doing focus groups, and I had young people explain it to me. And still to this day, the best explanation, I think, and I wrote about this in my book Fight, was a young man in upstate New York said, what we need is basically kind of a Rooseveltian kind of capitalism, okay? Rebrand, right?
Right.
We want the Square Deal and the New Deal, okay? Square Deal, break up the monopolies. New Deal, begin to invest in infrastructure where we all have kind of a fighting chance. That is, I think, to me, what younger people are kind of looking for when they kind of address the systemic issues. There isn't literally, I don't think there's a focus. I do hundreds of focus groups. Okay. There is virtually no focus group that I can assemble anywhere in this country where I don't interact with someone who is currently on the verge of or had been previously homeless or has someone close to them in that position. In some cases, I've met people who've been homeless twice in their life, once as a child during the Great Recession and again now. So you tell me, James, right? When we have that much, how's capitalism working in this country?
Again, people don't get me. I'm more of a cultural centers and economic interventionist, or I don't know, whatever you want to fucking call it, progressive or something. I believe it. So listen, there's a expression, monkey see, monkey do. What the fuck is the Yale Youth Poll?
Listen,
listen.
Let me tell you something. Listen,
Della, we got.
Listen,
James Carville,
James
Carville, you're going to ask a Harvard man about Yale?
I look at John Della, but anyway, what is that? I'm trying to come up with that. I got a Yale Youth Poll.
Listen, the way I look at this, James, is the more people looking at younger people and elevating their voice, the better, right? Yale or anyone else. All right.
Okay. So before I turn to a really serious issue, this AI stuff. All right. This is me, and I don't understand this, but it ain't going to be good for me. And I don't trust anybody to be able to shape this in a way that is going to be helpful to me. And I think that if the Democrats running now should say, we're going, and there's actually a time for bipartisanships and there's a time for congressional hearings, and that is for the Congress and American people to learn what this is, what its potential for good or ill is, and are there things that we can do? And if you let it go, look what happened to Standard Oil. Look what happened to AT&T. If we don't get ahead of this, it's going to get ahead of itself because these young people are ready to almost like ban this shit or something. And I don't know if that's a good idea.
Well, what's more relevant, I think, to young people today is they're experiencing what happens with Facebook and the other social media, right? That don't have enough guardrails, that are negatively infecting kind of political lives and their own lives, right? So I think that is, kind of the relevant conversation. But this is a really important opportunity, I think, for Democrats to begin to rebuild some trust with this generation. The number one word, when we did an open-ended question, we coded a couple thousand of them, the number one word associated with Democrats was weak. And when we talk about, in focus groups, they say, it's the HR department. Okay. One of the ways to begin to develop some trust. It's not through A/B testing ads. It's by leading on issues, recognizing that people are freaked out about AI right now, right? And develop some guardrails because there's a clear alternative position to what is happening within kind of the Trump White House, and begin to say, I hear you, I hear your concerns, and these are the questions that we need to understand, and these are the guardrails that need to be developed. That's an incredible opportunity to kind of engage with young people on the issue of their time.
I mean, so, all right, now I'm going to turn it over to you with one comment. When young people in focus groups talk about the HR department, that tells you how much of what a giant self-inflicted, stupid thing that this whole identity movement was. In all of its language and all of its bullshit, when you got people looking back at you saying that's the HR department, that's telling you something and you should listen to it and never repeat that mistake again for the rest of your fucking lives. Albert?
John, I think you made such a good point that they say when they talk about Democrats, the word they use is weak. When they talk about Republicans, the word they use is corrupt. It strikes, I think Democrats have a real challenge, but weak is easier to rectify than corrupt, because to rectify corrupt, you have to give up corruption, and Donald Trump and company don't want to do that.
And listen, I think that you're. I rather be rebuilding off of a place that was weak, because there's a pathway to that, right? And I'll tell you something. The pathway isn't dropping F-bombs in your press conferences. Okay.
Right.
It's not about growing beards. Okay.
Right.
Those are performative things that younger people see through. Okay. The pathway to go from weak to strong is to listen better. Okay. If there's anything that we learned from 2025, virtually no one knew of the next mayor of New York City's name a year ago. Okay. He went from zero to mayor because he listened, and there's strength in that. Right.
Right.
And the pathway, I think, for Democrats or for any leader is to show steadiness in an unstable and turbulent time. Okay. That is strength. Naming the reality, naming the concerns, that is strength. Listening to people, being honest about these conversations, right? Rejecting the tribalism that has helped perpetuate the situation that we're in, and giving people agency. Those are the basic parts of how you develop and rebuild trust, whether that's in journalism or in podcasting with your audience, or whether it's in politics. And I don't think enough people are adhering to those policies. They try to be cute and A/B test or to be performative in some ways, and young people see through that. We know that.
John, I was fascinated by what these young people said about vaccines. 67% are supportive, but only half are strongly supportive. Yet they don't like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and they say the most reliable sources are medical and science experts. It almost seems contradictory.
Well, there is a concern, of course, and this is where one of the most significant kind of partisan divides. Obviously, this is clearly going to become a partisan issue. You've got younger people who are just seeing one news feed, one algorithm on vaccines versus another, and it's kind of really impacting. I think kind of the overall conversation. The good news, it's a challenge though, is that personal doctors are still more kind of trusted, and people more confident in their opinions than others. But it'd be nice if there was, I think, a kind of more unity, kind of around this issue from a government an agency level, because it looks to me like this is headed towards another thing. Like, I don't trust the system. It's going to be individual choices, and of course, not everyone has the same access to physicians, as the other person, and it's I'm just kind of concerned about the role of misinformation and other things here.
You mentioned Mandami earlier as appealing to younger voters. When you've done so many focus groups, so not from this poll, are there any other political or social or entertainment figures that seem to understand and capture the imagination or support of most of these young voters?
It's a good question. I reflected upon that recently, and when I looked through some of the focus groups in the last year, it was interesting. one one example. Of course, you have the traditional ones, like Bernie Sanders, who he doesn't speak for all young people, but the degree to which he's been kind of authentic and true to himself is something. But something that I found in my notes surprising, but when I look back, it made sense. Someone mentioned actually Nancy Pelosi last year, right? And they what this young man actually what the comments were about Pelosi wasn't about the ACA, right? It was about that she was standing up and fighting kind of for her position against Donald Trump. That was like the reaction in terms of why that was someone that, was someone who exhibited strength, right? So I guess the point is,
no
it's
one
not
ever
just based
accused Nancy
upon age,
Pelosi of.
right?
Yeah, I was going to say no one ever accused Nancy Pelosi of being weak.
Right.
You know,
Right. So it's interesting. It's not, there's far more nuance in how younger people are thinking about this. Right. So it's not just based upon your age or what you look like or what label you have. Is other examples of showing kind of those little moments of connection around strength and empathy and listening. And that's what kind of I pick up. But there are not a lot of examples in politics right now, Al. There's just not.
James.
So, uh, if you would look, and I know this is overly general, but that's the way you can't get to the specific anymore. If you were called in to talk to anybody, about how to appeal to younger voters, what would be the Della Volpe 3 things on the back of the envelope? Everybody, off the Laffer curve on a cocktail napkin. What's the Della Volpe back of the envelope 3 things you got to do here? And there got to be 3. It can't be 2 and it can't be 4.
Be 3 things. Okay. The first thing I would do is I would operationalize listening. Okay. I would make that kind of a central part of my being. And that means that every time that I visited somewhere, I would make a point of doing deep listening within the organization, the university, the office, wherever that is, operational. And what I mean by operationalize that isn't just to pop in and pop out, but to take the ideas and to remind people of the degree to which they're being heard. That's kind of one thing, right? The second thing is, listen, our country is stronger when younger people are doing better. Okay, when teenagers, kids, and young families can have opportunities, the country is stronger. Okay, making that kind of the focus and taking those ideas that you hear in those listening sessions, okay, and then developing policy and letting younger people know, okay, that the policies are reflective of the conversations they've been having. Number 2. And the third thing is, don't leave it for people like you and me and others to communicate about that. Okay. Develop platforms within government and outside of government to let the younger people kind of share those messages themselves. So to me, it doesn't cost a lot of money. It takes a commitment, though, to truly caring and listening about people. And anyone can do that. And James, the examples within the Democratic Party of people who have done versions of that have been incredibly successful. Obama did portions of that. Deval Patrick in Massachusetts, Ed Markey did portions of that. And I think that committing to that now is it's essential.
I was going to do a listening tour. You wouldn't use it anymore, but some of our use was the barbershop poll because people used to talk in barbershops. All right,
Exactly. Amen.
Yeah, but I don't know what the modern equivalent of the barbershop poll is, but and if I would tell candidates, sit there, take notes, do a lot of cutaways, film it. A idea, hand a note to an aide. Yeah, I want to follow up on this. Anything like that, showing that you're listening and you're ready to take action. I think is going to go a long way. And people say it's bullshit. Say, well, you think it's bullshit. I actually think people have a collective wisdom of people smarter than me, and I'm going to listen to them. What the fuck? That's the easiest part in the world.
Right. And starting the conversation, which is, I know that you don't think the country's heading in the right direction. Okay. I know you don't think you'll ever be able to have the same, kind of life that your parents or grandparents had, right? And I know that AI is concerning you. Like I'm now paying attention to you now. Okay. I'm now paying attention. And I don't hear that enough. I just don't hear that enough, right? And James, I guarantee it. There are millions of younger people in this country today, despite their views about institutions, who want to be a part of this, okay? Who want to be empowered. And we have the ability to have more conversations with them and to make them part of the process. Every few years, I ask these questions, and there's so many more people who are willing to engage than we give them credit for.
Well, I'm Johnny. You have no bigger fan than me. There's nobody that provokes more
I'm a
thought,
co-captain.
more points than you do. And I've turned back down, but I can't thank you enough. And I guarantee you'll be on this show a lot more. And I hope that people pass around potential candidates what you're saying, because I think it's absolutely critical. I really do, and I appreciate you.
Well, and everybody out there ought to go take a look at that Harvard Youth poll that John just did in November, because it's not going to buoy your spirits, but it's certainly going to increase your knowledge and sense of where we are. John, it's always great to have you on. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Appreciate the opportunity, guys. And by the way, the Harvard Youth poll, I did a summary of that on my Substack, JDV on Gen Z, and it's there for everyone to access as well.